The other teams tried to collaborate on building the structure and descended into confusion, with everyone getting in each other's way. Our team leader solved the challenge brilliantly. She simply asked everyone in the team to move a piece a few centimeters to comply with the rule, and then let the person in the team with an aptitude for puzzles like this build it alone. For millions of years, carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have been regulated, in part, by a natural partnership between plants and microbes, tiny organisms in the soil. Plants absorb CO2 from the air and transform it into sugars and other carbon-based substances, while a proportion of these carbon products remain in the plant. Some transfer from the roots to fungi and soil microbes, which store the carbon in the soil. Another team of ethnographic researchers looked at how cell phones were used in Uganda, in Africa. They found that people who didn't have their own phones could pay to use the phones of local entrepreneurs, because these customers paid in advance for their calls. They were eager to know how much time they'd spent on the call so far. So the phone company designed phones for use globally with this added feature. The walls are made of several layers of honey-colored wood, all sourced from local beech trees, in order to improve the acoustic properties of the auditorium. And to amplify the sound, they are not straight, they are curved. The acoustics are also adjustable according to the size of orchestra and the type of music being played. What she was interested in was marine mammals, things like seals. And she found 3 places in the oceans which were hotspots, and what these had in common was that these hotspots were all located at boundaries between ocean currents, and this seems to be the sort of place that has lots of the plankton that some of these species feed on. So now people who want to protect the species that are endangered need to get as much information as possible. For example, there's an international project called the Census of Marine Life. The notion that you could create anything at all has major implications for our health. It means that we'll eventually be able to replicate anything This would have a phenomenal effect on our society. In time, it could even lead to the eradication of famine through the introduction of machines that produce food to feed the hungry. And many sufferers don't know the cause or the solution to their problem. The majority of our patients at the clinic tend to be women. They are especially vulnerable because of pregnancy, but also because of osteoporosis, which I personally believe to be the major cause of problems for women. I have many women patients who say they have completely given up exercise because the pain makes them so miserable. But of course, that starts up a vicious circle. Consumers will have much more choice. For instance, food products sold in Australia might be manufactured in the USA, China, Finland, and dozens of other countries at the same time, and mergers mean that governments are actually losing power to major global takeovers. We can probably all think of companies that exert a great deal of influence, which may be good for consumers. You wake up in the middle of the night in a strange hotel miles away from home, most probably from disoriented, when even the most expensive jet lag can seem empty and surroundings. You have paid a great deal of money to stay in this first-class hotel with its dispiriting technology, but according to recent research carried out by an international travel and public relations company, all is not well. I'm left-handed myself, and I actually didn't see any relevance to my own life when I happened to start reading an article by a sports psychologist called Peter Matthews. He spent the first part of the article talking about handedness in music instead of sport, which I have to say almost put me off from reading further. But what I soon became struck by was the sheer volume of both observation and investigation he had done in many different sports, and I felt persuaded that what he had to say would be of real interest. Living in the Antarctic hasn't always been so comfortable. Snow buildups caused enormous problems for 4 previous stations on the same site, which were buried and finally crushed by the weight. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but these buildings became a huge challenge To architects who finally came up with a remarkable solution, the buildings are placed on platforms, which can be raised above the changing snow level on legs which are extendable. The main reason why MSG is more commonly used in Japanese meals is tradition. For many thousands of years, the Japanese have incorporated a type of seaweed known as kombu in their cooking, as they discovered it had the ability to make food taste better. But it wasn't until 1908 that the ingredient in kombu, which was responsible for the improvement in flavor, was actually discovered to be glutamate by scientists working there. So how was this reflected in the design of the building? Well, Harrison decided to create pedestrian access to the building and to make use of the presence of water on the site. As people approach the entrance, they therefore have to cross over a bridge. He wanted to give people a feeling of suspense as they see the building first from a distance, and then close up, and the initial impression he wanted to create from the shape of the building as a whole was that of a box. So the phone company designed phones for use globally. With this added feature, ethnographic research has also been carried out in computer companies. In one company, IT systems administrators were observed for several weeks. It was found that a large amount of their work involved communicating with colleagues in order to solve problems, but that they didn't have a standard way of exchanging information from spreadsheets and so on. So the team came up with an idea for software that would help them to do this. Carbon-rich soil is dark, crumbly, and fertile, and retains some water. But erosion can occur if soil is dry, which is a likely effect if it contains inadequate amounts of carbon. Erosion is of course bad for people trying to grow crops or breed animals on that terrain. In the 1970s and 80s, Law was studying soils in Africa so devoid of organic matter that the ground had become extremely hard, like cement. There he met a pioneer in the study of global warming, who suggested that carbon from the soil had moved into the atmosphere. This is now looking increasingly likely. Teamwork can also lead to inconsistency, a common cause of poor sales. In the case of a smartphone that a certain company launched, one director wanted to target the business market, and another demanded it was aimed at consumers. The company wanted both directors to be involved, so gave the product a consumer-friendly name, but marketed it to companies. The result was that it met the needs of neither group. It Would have been better to let one director or the other have his way, not both. Now, industriousness, or hard work. It's easy to mock people who say they work hard. Low fat, low salt, whole grain, heart healthy, vegan, organic, free range, grass-fed, low carb, no added sugar. All these buzzwords, combined with shape-shifting guidelines, befuddling labels and fad diets wrapped up in pseudoscience, can make buying groceries these days fraught. That's partly why anything that claims to cut a clear path through the confusion has ready appeal. Witness the rise of the clean eating movement in the past few years. The rigid rules set out by self-appointed blogger gurus have since been shouted down as nonsensical notions of purity rather than coherent nutritional science. Asteroid collisions can be destructive, just ask the dinosaurs. Destructive, but they also bring key ingredients for life. Super-Earths can draw them to nearby worlds. Super-Earths, planets that are up to 10 times more massive than Earth, might play billiards with planetary systems. New simulations suggest that if a super-Earth existed in our own solar system, say between Venus and the Earth, far more asteroids would collide with us. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, if the timing is right. Understanding the effect of these massive planets on others nearby could help direct the search for life on exoplanets. All earthquakes look the same when they start, making it unlikely we will be able to predict which will cause the most devastation from early observations. Early warning systems rely on seismometers picking up tremors and sounding the alarm for nearby cities before major shaking starts. Even a few seconds warning can make a lot of difference, both for individual people and for organizations like hospitals. For example, Mexico's early warning system gave everyone a 10 to 15-second heads-up before Tuesday's magnitude 7.1 earthquake. Popular ride-sharing firm Uber has had its license to operate in London revoked in a surprise move by the city's regulator. There were multiple reasons for the decision. TfL cited the company's approach to reporting criminal offences. In August, a senior officer within London's Metropolitan Police Service wrote to TfL about Uber's slowness to report a passenger's accusation that her driver had sexually assaulted her. TfL said it was also concerned about how Uber obtained medical certificates and criminal records checks for drivers. The straw that broke the camel's back may have been the company's Greyball software, an internal application that Uber may have used to block regulators' oversight of the Uber app. A new process for 3D printing things could pave the way for lighter, faster aircraft that potentially fly further on the same amount of fuel. Today's aeroplanes are held together with thousands of metal rivets and fasteners. That's because the lightweight but strong aluminum alloys used for their frames are considered unwieldable. Try to weld them and you get a phenomenon called hot cracking, in which the finished alloy weakens and fractures as it cools. This and other adverse welding effects also stand in the way of 3D printing high-strength aluminum alloy parts. When researchers have tried, the resulting laser-fused mass flakes away at the welding area like a stale biscuit. Ebola virus, the bacteria that causes plague, a pandemic strain of flu. If any of these pathogens could be turned into bioweapons by terrorists or rogue nation-states, they would threaten humanity. Most life scientists have little awareness of biosecurity issues, according to a National Academies report released today. And it says there are multiple shortcomings in the systems designed to stop potentially risky research from being published. Mobile applications are using third-party data collection and advertising tools in order to monetize those applications. It happens across all types of apps, including ones that users may find fairly sensitive, like health and fitness, and wellness applications. Archaeologists look for clues that indicate that an area is worth digging up. Clues may come from the writings of someone in the past who has described the existence of a particular town or burial site. Sometimes sites are accidentally discovered during excavation for the construction of buildings, roads, dams, or railways. Historians can represent events that have happened in past centuries on a timeline, showing the four major periods of human history. A timeline is a good way to help us get history into perspective. It shows events from the past in a clear chronological order, that is, from the earliest to the latest event.